Welcome back, Baddies, to Baddies Mean Business. I'm your host, Rylie Jennings, and I'm so excited that you are here. This is my very first podcast, guys, in a really long time by myself. For those who've been listening for a while, you know that for the last couple of years, I've been with my best friend, Mackenzie Hatfield, co-hosting together, and as of recently, we decided to split. But I'm really excited for this next chapter of Baddies Mean Business. And today I'm going to be reintroducing myself, especially because I've been meeting a lot of people at conferences. For those who know, it's conference season. It's happening like every single week, everything. So I just want to reintroduce myself and who I am and what I'm going to be talking about in this new chapter of Baddies Mean Business. I'm so excited. There's been so much happening. As of recently, I'm really just trying to get my mind wrapped around all the transitions and all the new people I'm meeting and conversations and such good conversations. Recently, you may have seen the episode with Liz Trowler. She was employee number 3 at Olipop. That was a recent episode that I published. I think it was September, the second week of September. I have no idea. I don't know what day it is, but I'm really excited to kind of share like what's been going on in my life, but also talk about a few ideas that's just been running through my mind as of recently. So I am going to Samoa next week. Kind of crazy. It was a last minute trip that we booked to surprise my grandma. She's going back for the very first time in I think over a decade. It's been a while, and it's my very first time going, and my mom's very first time going back ever since she moved away when she was only like 6 months old. So I think that's one of the biggest updates I have. And what's really special about that is that in Samoa, that's really just where everything began. I've never really talked about it before, but my grandparents, my grandma, my grandpa, they used to live in American Samoa, and they moved over here to the States to really give my mom and her siblings a better chance of better opportunities, essentially. And what's been amazing about that is that we've really been living that dream, and they've got to see every single one of us. I have 27 cousins, and each of them got 4 kids, and we all just really got to indulge in the sacrifices that they made. And this podcast being one of them. I know there's a lot of people who really share about their family, especially those who are first generation. I'm not first generation, I'm just second generation. But I just would love to just share my perspective on it. Being able to reflect on like how life has been, and being able to go back to the homeland, the motherland, and really just get to indulge in what life was like back when my grandparents lived in Samoa. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll also be talking about different things that have been happening in life and a lot of ideas I've been talking to other people about, specifically on just like the idea of free thinking and creating new normals. And so recently, as some of you may know, I am a board member for San Diego Tech Hub, which is it's a community organization where we provide essentially a home for people who work in tech, but also other people involved in the professional ecosystem in San Diego. And we recently launched a newsletter through the San Diego Tech Hub where we get to highlight community members doing really cool things. So it's kind of like the tech hub version of what I'm really loving about Baddies Mean Business. It's just highlighting really cool people doing really inspiring things. And in this newsletter, we got to highlight the Innovation Day podcast that we published last week, I believe. And we got to highlight a bunch of cool founders. It's My Leche, Black Royalty Kingdom, Neat Sheets, and Access Tracks. And I'm hoping to do more opportunities like that. Because it was just amazing to be able to hear all these different stories and perspectives and why people do the things they do. And I feel like that's what the beauty of podcasting is getting to just hear stories. Like, and that's just really what your job is as a podcaster, is to be able to translate stories in the way that they should be and how people authentically experience them. So lots of exciting things there. But I'll go ahead and go back to our trip to Samoa. I'm going to go ahead and give a little context about the whole story, and then I'll be giving you more context on me and the way I think about my life and the experiences I've gone through recently, because a lot of the way I think is definitely rooted in my family. So my grandparents, they grew up in American Samoa and they moved over here to the United States. They moved to Honolulu back in the 70s. And my mom was only 6 months old. She was very young. She doesn't really remember Samoa, but I would always hear these insane stories. Not insane, but I would definitely say my idea of what Samoa is like today is it's not very aligned with what it actually is. Just because I hear a majority of my stories from my grandma, who they used to live in the village Masausi, and my grandpa at the time, he was chief of the village. But then when he moved to the States, he passed it along, I believe, to his brother. So we come from that background, and my grandpa was a farmer, and he drove a bus back in the day, and my grandparents would sell produce back in the market, and my grandma would always brag about how their produce was like when they always would run out of stock essentially, like before they can even unload the truck, and she was really, really proud of that. Um, so who would have known? My grandparents were little entrepreneurs themselves and in their own little way, and I think it's amazing. But, so that was kind of like the stories that I would grew up hearing from my grandma, and she has such a vivid memory of them as if it was yesterday, and she oftentimes misses the island as well because, it's just beautiful and, like, what you need, you provide yourself and you offer to other people, and it's very giving and selfless mentality of life. It's just kinda how we grew up. It's kinda hard not to reflect that in our everyday life, just wanting to always have that strong sense of community. It's just instilled really early on. And that's kind of like a big way in how I see life in general, which has been really helpful in many other ways. But to kinda go into my life ever since, so I grew up in Yakima, Washington. My mom met my dad here in Yakima, and we moved here. I grew up here. So if you can't tell, I'm Afakasi, which means I'm mixed, meaning I'm half Samoan, I'm half white. Um, but I feel like that was important. It's just important to acknowledge just because, I had a very, like, blended, cultural upbringing. And, I thought it was just really fun to be able to hear the stories of my family and coming from a Polynesian background, but also growing up here in Washington State, and in, like, an agricultural community of sorts. I think I'll jump to really the moment that changed my life completely. So there's a concept I always think of when it comes to my life right now and how I'm like reflecting over 2023. For those who've been keeping up, I was recently laid off this year, which was a challenge, of course, but it was also, I think, something that really um, gave me strength and perspective in what I really want to do. I used to be a chief of staff for a venture capital firm. I learned a lot through that experience and really had a positive experience through it. But ever since then, I've been running my own small media consulting business for startup companies and helping them basically implement tech and translate their stories to a broader audience. There's the pitch. That's the pitch, y'all. But really, what I just enjoy doing is helping people tell their stories in a way that other people will be able to understand them. So, in this year, I just been like talking to a lot of people and working with a lot of community groups, and it's been such a fulfilling experience this year working with other like nonprofits and working in the marketing side of things and the operating sides of things and introducing people to people they need to meet. And it's just been a really fulfilling year. And I feel like my mentality around this year really made me reflect back into a time that I kind of miss. I kind of miss who I was in this period of life, and I'll explain why. So, when I was 17 years old, I experienced a traumatic brain injury, which left me with a subdural and epidural hematoma, a fractured skull, loss of my taste and smell. Not to be so candid with it, but that's just genuinely what it was. And I'm fine. I'm obviously fine now, but I was also really lucky. So I was recovering over a few months at that time. And I just remember back then, I was just really scared of something this entire time up until I was 17 years old. I just always thought, I'm like, okay, well, once I'm 18 and I go to college, that's when life really begins. That's when I actually get to make my own decisions and I get to try the audacious things that I see on TV and I see online. And that's when my life begins and I can start making those choices. But when I was 17, that accident happened. And basically the question came that was I really going to be able to do all that? It was basically that chance, that dream was almost taken away. Not to be like, I hate saying it like that because it's also like, it sounds kind of dramatic, but it truly was the reality of what that was. Because when I would talk to doctors, they were saying that people who experience less injuries, um, sometimes they can't even function on their own without a caregiver. And to me, when I sat there, I was just confused. I was like, I feel fine, I'm fine. But what the miraculous thing about what happened to me was that I had a couple brain bleeds and the pressure that usually is caused by those bleeds, created between the blood and the skull. I mean, I'm not in medicine or STEM. This is just how I remember it being told me. But usually you have to get brain surgery to have release the pressure that's created there. But since I had fractured my skull miraculously directly where the bleed was, the pressure was released naturally and I didn't have to undergo surgery. Insane. I'm like, that's crazy. If that was a thank God, the lucky girl energy was crazy at that time. So that was before lucky girl energy was even a term. That's a Gen Z term for just luck for those who may be listening. Um, but anyways, I heard that news and I was just shook. I was like, thank God, because it made me just think about everything that was happening in my life, the friends I had at the time, like, the things that I prioritized, the way I treated my family. Everything was just put into perspective of what am I doing? Like this, it gave me the biggest reality check I feel like I can ask for. And so moving forward, I just like made this promise to myself internally that I'm going to live the most spontaneous life I can possible, period. Like, I am determined to just full send it, to do whatever I can to live beyond average, just live beyond average. And that was ever since then, that was like 5 years, 6 years ago. Oh man, that was 6 years ago. That's what I've been doing, y'all. It's just really trying to live by that mantra of like second chances don't always come every day. Might as well just do it now. Might as well just take the leap. Might as well just try something out of the box. The worst thing that can happen had already happened. So it's like, what do I have to lose? Of course, there's been like fear popping in and out. I mean, who doesn't? I'm human too. But that's at least I had like that moment that I can always kind of go back to and think about. But the hard thing about it is I feel like, honestly, as of recently, as I'm, like, getting into my professional life, it's like a mantra that I've forgotten, and it's like sometimes I let fear get in the way too much or get expectation in the way too much just based off of, like, how I should be acting or I should be acting older, like, I'm young in a professional world, usually the people I hang around are at least 30 and up. Should I be acting older? Like, there's all these realizations that talking about this on the podcast right now has been so helpful to really talk about. And I've actually given a keynote talking about the subject, and I know for a fact it actually helps other people too. And that's why I'm sharing it right now. So I came to realization on this. I began the process of creating my new normal. I'm trying to explain what it's like. It's like having a concussion, of course, but you can't seem it's kind of like you have two different voices in your head, the person that you were before and the person you are now. It's like you remember what it was like to be who you were before and think the way you did before, except for now, I just, like, did not have the capacity to think as deeply as I did. Like, my thought process was very shallow because I just wasn't capable of thinking very deeply just because of the injury. And so I'm like, why am I getting so frustrated? Like, why am I getting to that point? Um, why am I like, why can I not be normal? It was my thought process, basically. Another time I had this feeling was actually when I got laid off, because I think when you're just naturally laid off, you kind of get a hit to the ego of like, okay, well, who am I now? And that was the same exact question I asked myself when I got the injury. I'm like, who am I? Because doesn't that sound wild to say out loud? It's kind of crazy to think about, but that's genuinely what was happening. And so I told myself, I'm like, I think I just had this sense of fearlessness after that, was just like, um, I want to play volleyball again. I was a volleyball player at the time, and I'm like, I want to play volleyball again. And I fought really hard to play volleyball. I never got to play it the same capacity as I did before. But I was really proud of the fact that I was able to play again and finish out my senior year. I had to apply to colleges at that time while I was recovering. Thank God. I mean, not thank God, but like I did write about that experience as part of my essays. And it was just really nice to have that medium of therapy to write something. And it also helped me with my future. And in the end, I ended up getting accepted to San Diego State University, where I attended college for 4 years. So doing all that my senior year, and then I moved to San Diego. And then when I moved to San Diego, it was just such an amazing feeling, because it's like I get to reinvent who I am. I feel like I've been trying to blend the new way I think, like the new version of myself and the old version of myself that whole year while I was finishing my senior year. But then when I moved to San Diego, it was like I can just start new and just be the way I feel, because obviously I'm never going to be who I was before. I just don't think the way I did. My chemistry, I don't know if it's genuinely the chemistry in my mind was different, but that's how it felt. So when I went to San Diego, I just really tried to throw myself into as many activities as I could, because I was doing that process of rediscovery, which is like a lot of other people who move to a bigger city or move out of their hometown or move into or go to university in the first place as a freshman. And you're kind of just like rediscovering. I'm like, okay, who am I going to be after 4 years? Let's find out. So I went to a bunch of club meetings, and one that stood out to me was the Entrepreneur Society meeting. I grew up watching Shark Tank. Yeah. So I was just like, I love Shark Tank. Let me go to the another thing that I forgot was that when I was a kid, I would have this little booklet that I would write inventions in. Like, like I'm an engineer, like mapping out prototypes. I would have this little book where I would do that. None of them were good ideas. Like I would never get money on Shark Tank for any of those ideas. But it was just always something I was just really fascinated about. So I went to Entrepreneur Society meeting, and it really just changed the way I think about everything. I've said this before in many other podcasts, and I met Bernard Schroeder. He at the time was the director of the Lab and Entrepreneurship Center on campus. He used to work for the marketing on Amazon when it first launched. Like a whole bunch of like just really cool background information on him that I'm like, I've never met anyone who worked for Amazon or Google or Microsoft or any of these companies. I always just felt like it was just these people hidden behind this veil. Like never really imagined what it was like to work back in tech. So his talk at that time was just really about ideas and how ideas shape the world. And it shook me. Like I was just like, no, 100%. And I think anyone as a young person is trying to figure out how everyone wants to change the world in some way, and everyone wants to help people in some way. And at that moment, I realized maybe entrepreneurship could be my way. And so one of the student executive board members said, apply to this incubator program on campus. Ooh. The incubator program is called Zip Launchpad. And the Zip Launchpad, it basically helps students create companies in school, providing resources and teachings and workshops and a bunch of things to help them really just go through the process of building a startup company. And he said, go ahead and apply. It just might change your life. That's exactly what happened. Truly, I would definitely say. So as a freshman, I applied. After my first semester, I was accepted into the program. I was the only female freshman, and I was only one of two freshmen who joined that program. And it was just like the best type of people to be around, just a bunch of creative people who had these big aspirations, who a little bit older than me too, which was just really nice to be around people who already had some experience being in university for a little bit. And I was in that program for about a year. I wanted to basically, I applied with an idea that I came up with in my senior year with my experience recovering from the brain injury. I wanted to create a software platform that helped other traumatic brain injury survivors manage their recoveries and monitor them. Basically, seeing is progress being made. Because when I was recovering, it was just really hard to see, like, is my smell coming back? Like, is my taste coming back? Like, how am I thinking? It's just kind of difficult to really track progress. And I was trying to figure out a way to really track that progress. Um, I did that for about a year and I took a pause. And I think honestly, a lot of it was fear for sure. That's that fear coming back. But other side of me was thinking, like, if I'm gonna do something this important, I want to do it right. So I did a bunch of other crazy things. I moved to Nashville and I did door-to-door sales for a bit. I became a video assistant for the sports teams at SDSU just to kind of like really get involved with the athletic programs again. And then I discovered venture capital around my junior to senior year during the pandemic. Um, During the pandemic, I discovered this investment competition in San Diego that was held by a fund based in San Diego, and it was my very first time, having to be on the other side. It's basically being an investor in businesses, so venture capital. And I had to source a company, interview the founder, report on the founder's company, and basically pitch the idea of funding this company. So that experience was just so thrilling to me. And I talked to some mentors and some advisors and introducing me to some other founders that they were aware of that I was already surrounded by the incubator program and the entrepreneurship center on campus. So I kind of was really glad that I was able to have somebody I could even talk to and ask those questions. After that experience, I just became so fascinated by venture capital because as a founder, starting off as a founder, it was just like I had such an appreciation for the emotional toll of being a founder that I thought it would be amazing to be able have a small fraction of what would you say? I thought venture capital was being able to be a part of many different founders' dreams rather than just being a part of your own dream. And for me, I found a lot of fulfillment in helping other people achieve their dreams. And in a way, it helps many different problems as well. And that's how I saw venture capital. For me, it wasn't so much about like the financial returns. Like as a finance major, I never really saw myself in like a Fortune 500 or like Wall Street or JP Morgan or wealth management. I just never saw myself in that. But I saw venture capital, or especially early stage venture capital, as my way of really tapping into what I believed in, but also really having some sort of effect on all these ideas that are being created throughout the world. So out of college, my first job was a chief of staff at a venture capital firm. We invested in enterprise software tools, API first platforms, creator tools, overall just a generalist fund. And it was just such a privilege to have that experience, being able to see how a fund operates and how managers have to think in order to really attract really strategic and really incredible limited partners. Like understanding that whole relationship cycle of what it takes to make capitalism grow and run. So I'm very grateful to my partner at that time. But I also think that I do believe that everything happened for a reason. And I was then transitioned from that role. And ever since then, since April, I've been running my own media business. Luckily, I had chosen to create an entity, an LLC, last year because we were working on getting sponsorships for the podcast. I kind of missed this part, but we started the podcast my senior year of college, just kind of really nailing down that story, that whole idea of listening to a bunch of different stories. I love listening to founder stories. I love giving founders the opportunity to be heard personally, of course, and professionally, and being a safe keeper of their story and making sure that it's accurately translating what they want to be portrayed as. So Baddies Mean Business was born. And it also was our way of really just sharing who we were as young women. But since then, it really has evolved to what it is today. What I really believe in today, which is as I run this media business and I meet other startup founders, I just think it's such a beautiful thing that storytelling has such a crucial part of the world, and specifically also, of course, like the startup ecosystem. So the the real theme of this episode is the best storytellers win. That's where I land today. What I've really have been nailing down and having more conversations on is that what I discovered in venture capital is like, especially early stage, telling a really amazing story can get you really far. And being authentic in that story, people will feel it and they will understand it and people will relate to it as well. And so I think the most profound founders that I've met just have like this incredible ability to almost feel like they are directly in your own mind, thinking the things that you're thinking and actively trying to solve the problems that you're thinking about. And though that's what's so exciting to me right now is that media is not new. As a Gen Z girly, social media have a bad rap. I get it. Trust me, I get it. But I also think that's just the way marketing is today, is that you do have to have a brand presence. And I think community-led growth has never been more popular trend in like the business development um philosophy or whatever you may say. Community-led growth being that you build a a community, an online community, a physical community of people who identify with your message, identify with your product, and really just believe in the cause that you're serving. Therefore, they have the ability to help create this exponential this exponential effect when it comes to expanding your reach. Basically, people like you, they'll talk about you, and they'll share about you. Point blank, period. Um, and I'm really excited that I get to be in the world at this time where that's something that level of authenticity and connection is a priority. And building upon that cause is the type of that's what I want to do. That's the life I want to live. And I've found throughout the last few months that a lot of people do too. They want to be a part of that too. So it's very high level. It's very abstract. But if you relate to it, please go ahead and give the podcast a review for one, please, so we can amplify this story. But also, I also love hearing from you. Also, give a follow on Instagram and send me a message. I just really want to hear like what's going on in your life. And how can I really accurately form the podcast around the real life experiences of the people listening to it. Let's be frank. A lot of this is going off of my own experience in my own life, talking about subjects that I'm curious about. But there's a lot of ideas out there and a lot of perspectives out there. How can I help you, man? You woman. How can I help you? Please. So thank you so much for listening to my story. That really sums up a gist of it. There's so much more, of course, so many stories to tell. But I truly believe that overall people are good. Overall people are great. The best storytellers do happen to win. What if we were giving the power of storytelling to the people who really deserve it and who giving them the attention that they deserve? What if? Craziness. But anyways, thank you so much for listening to this point. I will also be talking about concepts of free thinking and expanding free thinking and being able to share really tough ideas in a way that's healthy and productive and people can listen to it. And I'll also be sharing the stories of people who truly inspire me and are doing incredible things for the world. And I feel like their perspective should be heard by you. So give this podcast a follow, share it to a friend, share it to a girly friend, get your girl dinner. If you don't know what girl dinner is, send me a message. I'll explain it to you. But other than that, thank you so much for listening. I will talk to you all next week.